Hi there, I'm Savannah Mexto with Mannor Law Group, and I'm excited to welcome you to another Webinar Wednesday with esteemed elder law and estate planning attorney, Robert Mannor. This week, Bob will be discussing a topic that isn't always easy to talk about. In fact, in many families, growing up, you may have been taught to avoid discussing this at all. And that topic is your parents' money. Today, you'll learn the 5 most important reasons you should care about your parents' money and why it is so important to start changing the conversation. Before I pass the mic, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping details. Now, first, even though Bob is an attorney, today's webinar will not give specific legal advice. If you have a question about your unique situation, please contact us after the webinar. Also, if you have a general question during today's presentation, please use our question box. We will save time after the webinar to review questions, but if for some reason we don't get to your question, we will contact you after the presentation. Also note that today's presentation will be recorded and the replay will be sent out tomorrow so that you can share it with family, friends, or anyone who you think could benefit from hearing this information. Now, why should you listen to what the folks at Mannor Law Group have to say? First, note that we're a nationally recognized and respected elder law and estate planning firm. All 3 of our attorneys are accredited by the Veterans Administration to assist veterans with claims and appeals. Attorney Bob Mannor is nationally board certified as an elder law attorney by the National Elder Law Foundation. He's one of only 19 attorneys in Michigan to achieve this designation. Bob is also a leader among elder law attorneys in Michigan. He's currently chair-elect of the State Bar of Michigan Elder Law and Disability Rights Section and past president of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, Michigan chapter. Lastly, my favorite reason, Mannor Law Group has been honored by readers of our local paper as the best or favorite law firm for the last 8 years in a row. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome attorney Bob Mannor.
Hey folks, we're going to get started right away here on this. And so this is an interesting topic and sometimes difficult to think about because, you know, as Savannah said, it's not really something that you want to seem like you're asking questions to your parents for the wrong reasons, or that you're trying to be greedy or anything like that. And so what we find is I named the topic this way intentionally because it is kind of a provocative title to say, okay, well, most people say, oh, well, you know, I'm doing fine. I don't care about my parents' money. My point on it is that you care about your parents' money because you care about them. And so I'm going to bring you over into my world a little bit because we help folks all the time with situations where the parents at an older age, or they get sick, or they have dementia, or Alzheimer's, or Parkinson's, or had a stroke, or whatever, and now we're having to deal with that crisis. And the kids come into it, and they're completely clueless about anything, about where the bank account is, about how to access the bank account, about where the investments are, whether there's life insurance, whether there is any retirement accounts, whether there's a 401k or an IRA, how to access those things, how to set those up properly for the future, after the stroke, after the Alzheimer's diagnosis, those types of things. And we're often scrambling to deal with that. And sometimes we even have to go into court and get a court order so that we can address the problems that are there. And this can all be avoided by planning ahead for this. And so what I often hear is, oh, don't worry about that. I mean, when we talk to older folks, sometimes they'll say, don't worry about that. We're all set because I put my daughter's name on the account, because I got legal documents done 10 years ago, 20 years ago, last year, whatever it is. And you would think that that would be sufficient. But really there is a little bit of, that's kind of like saying, I'm perfectly healthy because I went to the doctor last year. And particularly because when you go to the doctor, you might be going to the heart doctor and your real trouble is actually your lungs or something like that. In other words, when folks think of going to a lawyer, they think that, well, every lawyer is exactly the same and every, situation is the same. And the reality is there's actually very few lawyers that focus on, well, what about the rest of life? A lot of times when people go to lawyers, they think about, well, what's going to happen when I die? And that's important, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But more important, and what I think why you should be concerned about the money is not what happens when they die. And I think that's what everybody's mindset is. Even the lawyers, even the financial advisors, even the bankers, all of the people that are advising mom and dad and advising you, and even in our own sort of expectations, we have this idea that we're really talking about is what happens after they die. And that's important, kind of, a little bit, I guess, but it's not nearly as important as what happens before they die. And so very few people focus on that. And so when they say they went to a lawyer, the lawyer might have been focused on what happens after they die. Okay, great, fine. Maybe you have a trust, maybe you have a will, maybe you have beneficiary designations, whatever it is. But that's not what the issue is. And that's not why you should be most concerned about your parents' money. Certainly that'll make things easier if you have an idea of where things are, and that makes sure that they're set up properly. It's going to save you money, save you time, save you taxes, save you inconvenience, make life a lot easier for you if mom and dad have set that up well. But it's not the end all be all. That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is, well, what happens until I die? And we all kind of imagine that we're just going to be fine. I was talking to a woman yesterday and she said, well, my intent is to be perfectly healthy until the second I die, and then, die at a ripe old age of 101 without ever having any serious illness. And I think she was being a little tongue in cheek there, because I think she knows from her personal experience that that's not the way life always goes. In fact, it never, hardly ever goes that way. That most of us are going to have some period of time that we need to be dependent on others, whether it be for physical dependence or just help making decisions, help paying our bills, help making things that are structured properly. And if we're expecting our daughter or son to step up in that situation, because most of us are going to need that, whether it's for a day or a year or 10 years, most of us are going to need that for some period of time before we die. That don't have the capacity or ability to get to the bank or to balance our checkbook or to make good decisions with regard to organizing our assets. And a lot of folks will just say, well, that's okay, because I set my son for that. I set my daughter for that. Okay, that's the first step. That's something, but does the daughter know where things are? Have things been consolidated appropriately? Do we have a plan for how to access that? Sometimes people say, well, I have a power of attorney. Do we know whether that power of attorney is going to be accepted? If you've ever tried to use a power of attorney at a bank, it wouldn't surprise me at all if you got the runaround. If that you were told that they weren't sure they were going to accept it, they were going to send it off to their legal department, that they were going to, and no matter what legal document it is, if we don't have it lined up properly, if we haven't notified the proper people, if we don't have the children having sufficient information about mom and dad's finances or mom and dad's legal situation or mom and dad's, all of the details, when they have to step up, it is going to be so much harder. It's going to be much more heavy lifting and much more crisis and much more difficult to not have those things in place. So that's what today is about. It's really about not you being greedy. It's about you caring for your parents and wanting to make sure things are in order. And having said, well, I already went to the lawyer, or I went to the UAW Legal Services, or I went to download a form, or I put my daughter's name on an account. None of those are good enough answers. I hate to say that, but it's true. And we're going to talk about some of those things. So let's get right into it. The first thing I wanted to have is a don't. Don't. This is so important. So we're going to talk about why you should care and why it's important to get involved. But sometimes our instincts can hurt us. And our instincts, whether it's mom and dad's idea or your idea, there's 4 things that I want to say absolutely do not do. They are not the answer. But you say, well, wait a second. That's what my grandma did and that worked out fine. Or that's what my neighbor did and that worked out fine. Couple things. You don't necessarily know all the details about what grandma did or what the neighbor did. And the thing is that it might have been more complicated than you think. Even if it wasn't complicated, it may have been a long time ago and the laws have changed. And finally, they may have unintentionally broken the law. And I say that with all sincerity, that there are a lot of times that people trying to do what's best are actually committing a felony by transferring money and not disclosing it, or giving money to the kids and not reporting it when we have to file for some kind of benefit to pay for long-term care or home care or things like that, or hiding money in the gun safe, or hiding money, or transferring money to the kids and not acknowledging it. And there's a reasonable chance now that you're going to get caught. The technology has changed over time, and now they have this thing called um, uh, asset verification. And so they find a lot of this stuff. You say, well, how would they ever find? How do they know I didn't spend, that grandma didn't go to the casino and waste $20,000 at the casino? Well, they don't have to know that. They just have to see that the $20,000 is missing, and then they say, well, what happened to it? And if you say, oh, well, grandma must have gone to the casino, then they'll say, prove it. It's not up on them to prove it. You're applying for a benefit to help pay for a nursing home. You're applying for a benefit to help pay for home care. If you want to participate in that program, you've got to comply with their rules. And if their rules say you can't just give money away, you can't just hide money, you can't just move money from here to there, and they're going to ask you about it. And if you can't explain what happened or prove what happened, it could actually be, hopefully not, but it could be that grandma actually went to the casino and wasted $20,000. I certainly hope not. But if she did, you could be in trouble, because you're still going to have to prove it. How do you prove it? Well, that's going to be tough. That's going to be a tough one. So that's why we don't want to gift money away or try to hide it. That is not going to be the answer. You will be penalized. And they look back 5 years. So if anything happened in 5 years prior to mom or dad or grandma needing care, then we're going to have a real problem if you gave money away. I'm not talking about $100 at Christmas. What I'm talking about is intentionally moving money with the idea of trying to hide it or protect it or those types of things. That is not the answer. There are answers. There are good answers, but you need a lawyer to go through this process. If you try to do it on your own, you're only making matters worse. Don't demand to take over financial decisions. When I say you should care about your parents' money, that doesn't mean that you should bully yourself and impose yourself and say, I'm taking over, I'm the oldest, I'm taking over, this is the way it's going to be. That's just not the approach, and it's not right. It's not the right answer by any means. So if that's your inclination, please, that's going to cause family fights, it's going to cause arguments, it might make mom and dad kind of just put their feet in cement and not listen or take any help. Demanding to take over is always a bad idea. This has got to be a collaborative approach. Don't move the money out of their name. Sometimes people think, oh, well, we'll just move it to the kids. We'll move it to, something hidden or whatever. That is not the answer either. And don't just add your name to the account. So a lot of people think, oh, well, I've added my name to the account, that should be sufficient. First of all, it creates more liabilities for mom and dad. So the possibility exists at that point that that something happens to the kids. And if something happens to you, so now you get divorced, or you get in a lawsuit, or you get where your house is foreclosed, or your credit card issue, or your business has issues, or whatever happens to you, or you get sick. That's the other thing that happens. You get sick. Now mom and dad's money is exposed to it because you put your name on their account. Mom and dad's money is exposed to all of your problems. So don't do that, number one. Number two is it doesn't help, okay? It doesn't help. It is not going to solve the problem because it doesn't make it so that it's protected by it's in your name. Sometimes people say, well, my name's on it, so doesn't that mean that half of it's mine? No, it still means, according to Medicaid and all the different government programs, it means 100% of it's mom and dad's, but 100% of it's also yours, meaning that if either of you have medical issues, then that money is exposed to that, okay? If either of you have a stroke or Alzheimer's or whatever, then that money is going to be exposed to that. So this is very problematic. Don't just add your name to the account. That's not the answer. Okay, so now that I've gotten through the don'ts, let's talk about the 5 reasons. So the first reason is a child should care about their parent, mom and dad's money, is to allow them to keep their independence. This goes against the thought of the kids are caring because they want to take over the money. Nope, we want independence. That's the whole point. And parents don't want to be a burden to their children. They don't want to cause their children any more grief. But with proper legal documents, we can make it so that mom and dad can still have control. They can still have independence. They can still go to the bank and get money out if it's appropriate, and yet get help from their kids. And that's not by putting the kid's name on the account. Again, I cannot repeat that enough, because that is the standard thing that everybody thinks you're supposed to do. And the bank might even tell you to do is put your kid's name on the account. No, that is not a good answer. What we need to do is we need to look at a trust agreement. We need to look at a power of attorney situation. And so that we have the authority, the kids can have access, the kids can know about the account, they can have the ability to write checks off the account, but they don't own the account. We don't need the kids to own the account, because that's going to only cause more problems. So by creating a good estate plan, by creating proper legal documents, you're actually increasing mom and dad's independence, because they still have, you're not taking control away from them. You're just providing assistance. So we do this all the time for mom and dads that are perfectly fine. We do this all the time for folks that are younger, and we want to have something in place that says, okay, well, but I do this for 18-year-olds. So we have a package that we do for our clients and our clients' children, where they say, okay, my 18-year-old is going off to college. What if something happens to them? Well, I need to have access to their bank account. I need to be able to have access to their medical information. I maybe need to, me as a dad, I may need to have the ability to make medical decisions for my child, because once they turn 18, the parent has no control, no authority, and no rights to anything over an 18-year-old. And so this is something that is about independence. It's about that ability. So it's not taking over. It's just making sure that if something bad happens, we have a better way of dealing with it. And so it's one of those things that not only do we want to have those legal documents in place, but we want to have that conversation to say, okay, but what do we do? Okay, yeah, we have a legal document, we have a power of attorney, we have a trust, whatever. But what does that mean to you? How do you use that? Where's the accounts? So many times when we're dealing with a crisis, the kids will come in and they say, yes, that's everything, that's everything. And then we'll find out later, as we're going into going through it, that in fact there's another account somewhere, or there's a life insurance, or there's an investment account, or there's other real estate, or there's an inheritance, or there's whatever. And so if the kids don't have a proper understanding of where things are, it's just going to cause all kinds of havoc. Now, we deal with that all the time. That's part of how we help people. We will deal with that. If your parents have not done it, we will work through that. But it's going to cost more, and it's going to be more difficult for the kids, and it's going to be more difficult for the parents. And so it's better to have these things in place and have the kids have information about, okay, these are my bank accounts, these are my investments, this is my life insurance, this is everything. And if there are too many, maybe we need to consolidate. That's another thing where kids can help the parents. So depending on the age of the parents, maybe they grew up and their parents went through the Great Depression. If their parents went through the Great Depression, lots of folks think that they should have, every banking town has an account at it, or we have multiple investment accounts, and we have multiple bank accounts. And so I've had people come in that had 60 different accounts, didn't have a lot of money. You'd think 60 different accounts, they must be multimillionaires. No, they didn't have a whole lot of money, but they had the money spread out so much over 60 different accounts. That's going to be unmanageable. It's going to be unmanageable for the person, for dad. It's going to be unmanageable for mom. They may have a pretty good idea where everything is, but at some point in life, it's time to consolidate and say, okay, this doesn't make sense anymore. It probably never did make sense to have that many accounts, okay? Unless you're, a billionaire, and then go do your best. But if you're not, then, that's one of the things where we can help mom and dad to say, okay, why don't we make this more organized? So you're not just getting all of these statements in the mail. Let's get one statement that organizes everything. Let's get two statements. Let's consolidate 15 accounts down to 3 accounts or 4 accounts. Make it more manageable, more where you have the ability to know what's out there. Okay. All right. Next one. The second reason is parents with children's involvement can create a plan if something bad happens. This is such an important thing. So many people wait. They don't come and see me until there's a crisis. And even when they know there's going to be a crisis, or they have a pretty strong suspicion. So dad's been showing signs of Alzheimer's, or mom's been showing signs of memory loss and dementia. whatever the scenario is. You can kind of see that, oh boy, things are turning in that direction. And yet they still don't come and see me. They wait until there's an absolute crisis, until somebody wanders away, or they're in the hospital, or they're picked up by the police because they got confused or lost or whatever, or they got in a car accident, or a lot of times it's that they went to the hospital and the hospital says, no, you can't just go home alone anymore. And so that we do with that, we deal with that, and we do crisis planning all the time. It's a whole lot of what we do, and we help you figure out what to do, how to get access, how to get benefits to pay for the care that's needed, and do all of that. And I'm happy to meet with you in a crisis, but my goodness, wouldn't life be so much easier if we had a plan for that? Because most of us are going to face that, and nobody likes to think about this. Nobody likes to plan for this, to think that, oh, I might have a stroke, I might have memory loss at some time, I might get diagnosed with Parkinson's, or maybe I've already been diagnosed with Parkinson's or some other disease. And yet people wait until there's a crisis to come in and say, okay, well, now how does me as the son, who I know dad said he wanted me to be in charge, and I know there's a piece of paper that says I'm in charge, what exactly do I do? Well, let's talk about that before you need it. Let's talk about that even if there's not a diagnosis. Let's have a plan in place. And so we have a thing in our office we call a life plan, where we kind of set that out, and mom and dad can discuss what their desires are, have better quality of life. Quality of life might mean staying in the home if at all possible. Quality of life might mean making sure that we have social interaction. Quality of life might mean making sure that we are going to protect that house and then we're going to pass that house on to the kids. Maybe it means that we want to make sure that the care that we get is going to be sufficient, and so it's best to do that. And a lot of people don't, but I really wish a lot more people would come in and be encouraged by their kids to say, okay, mom and dad, I'm really happy you went to a lawyer and you got a will done, you got a power of attorney done. Let's actually have a plan for what if there was a crisis, what if you had a stroke, what if your memory loss gets worse. How the doctor said that there's some concerns about you driving or something like that. Why don't we go to the lawyer? Which is, again, not every lawyer does this. Almost no lawyers do this. We're very unique in that we help people through this stage of life. And so it's something to give strong consideration, to come in and do the planning before you get too sick, okay, before it's a crisis. Next, of the reasons why children should care about mom and dad's money is it opens options for paying for future care needs. If you come in a crisis, we're likely to have limited options, okay? There are things that we do, if we do them, we're always going to have options. Let me just put it that way. We always have options, even in a crisis. They just might not be as good of options. We might not get our preferred place of care. We might not be able to stay home and get care when we come in a crisis. Much more likely that we will be able to make that happen, that mom and dad can stay in their own home and get care to come to their home if we plan 3 years in advance, if we plan 5 years in advance for that. If you come in and they already need care, or they're going to need care next month, we're going to find ways to get them care and get it paid for. There are options out there for everybody. It might not be their preferred option. It might not be the quality of life that they were hoping for. Okay, so we still have to do it. We need to make sure they're getting good care, but it may mean that more money is exposed. It may mean in order to pay for it that we're going to have to consider other options other than home care. It may mean that we can't go to that assisted living or that memory care because they're not tied into this program or that program. But if we had planned 3 years or 5 years in advance, we would have much more options for actually making sure that we're able to stay in our home, that we're able to use that assisted living that's down the street, or that we really like, or that our daughter works at, or whatever the scenario is. All right, the next one, as to the reasons why children should care about their mom and dad's money, is to help with estate maintenance and administration. Okay, so yes, even if we do have proper legal documents, which is great, that's a starting point. And mom and dad often think, and the kids, not just mom and dad, the kids, everybody often thinks it's just about having this form filled out. No, that's not it. That's a first step. Yep, we got to have that. That's the first step. But the next step is, well, okay, where do I go? How do I do that? What is that going to look like? How are we going to administer the estate after death? How are we going to maintain it if you ever need my help paying for you know, accessing your money to pay your bills for you with your money? What does that process look like? And so it is very, very important that, especially at some point in life. Now, I know a lot of parents would prefer to be private about this, right? But at some point, it really is important that they share. Otherwise, the kids are walking in blind, and it's just going to be so much more work, and they might miss something. I'm certain that some of my clients have missed out on life insurance policies that that the parents never told the kids about or never gave them sufficient information about, and we're pretty sure it's out there, but we can't find it because we don't have the proper documentation. We don't know where to call, those types of things. Okay. And then I think this might be the final one here. The fifth reason why a child should care about mom and dad's money is because you care. Okay, it may come across as you're only caring about an inheritance, but that's not what this is about. Sure, we want life to be easier. We don't want it to be where you end up having to pay more taxes than are necessary, or that it takes a year to settle the estate, or any of that. That would all be great. And that's part of the process too. Of course, that's part of the process. But just as important is it, the reason why is because you care about your parents. They care about you too. That's why they did the, maybe that's why they did the will. That's why they did the trust, is they say, well, after I die, I want it to be easier on my kids. And so you should care about it and ask these questions, because you want to say, well, before you die, I want it to be easier on you. I want it to be easier on the kids too, but I want it to be easier on mom and dad, and have them have the options and quality of life and all of that. Okay. So, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask those questions. Otherwise, Savannah is going to give you some information about how to rewatch this video if you want to rewatch it, or how to ask questions, or how to get a hold of our office.
Thanks, Bob. I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat a link for you to follow. So this link is going to set you up with a calendar. You'll be able to choose a day and a time where a member of our team can give you a call. This call will last maybe 10-15 minutes, and it'll give you a chance to ask us questions, questions about our firm, questions about your situation, and then you can also we can ask you questions about your situation, and we can really both decide if we're the right firm for you. You know, you have a lot of options out there, and so we want to make sure that we're the best one for you. And the best thing is that if we're not, if for some reason we think, oh, maybe we're not the best firm, or even if you decide, we can also refer you to someone else who can help. So there's really no risk in scheduling this appointment. So I have just put in the chat box a link to that calendar. You can also give us a call at any time. Our phone number is 810-694-9000. Again, that's 810-694-9000. I have also put that phone number in the chat box as well. So if you say, I don't want to schedule an appointment, I just want to take care of this now, then give us a call. We're more than happy to help. Tomorrow, I will be sending out the replay of today's presentation, so you can share that with family, with friends, or coworkers, or anyone who you think could benefit from hearing this information. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we will see you next week.